This was a verdict that we were expecting. We're going to appeal, and we're going to win on appeal. I mean, that's the goal.
The president's going to cooperate with the pre-sentence investigation, and we're going to speedily appeal this unjust verdict. I think this case is replete with reversible error. We plan to vigorously defend President Trump's rights in the appellate courts all the way up to the US Supreme Court if necessary.
It's abundantly clear that Donald Trump's legal team intends to appeal the criminal convictions that Trump is now dealing with as a result of the hush money trial. He was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business documents, but there were some elements to how the trial was conducted that the legal team plans to focus on during appeal. And according to reporting by Politico, there is a pretty good possibility they might win on appeal. So before we discuss what the fallout would be if the verdicts were in fact reversed, let's talk about what the arguments are here. So Trump's first chance to challenge the verdict will come within 30 days of his sentencing on July 11th. At that point, he can appeal with New York's first judicial department. Now that court has such broad discretion to review jury findings that it's sometimes called the 13th juror. Okay, now the way the appellate division, according to Politico, is structured could also cut in Trump's favor. The division is dubbed the 13th juror in New York because judges are allowed to make decisions based on the facts of the case, not only the law. And just to further elaborate on that, you have former Manhattan District Attorney Diana Florence, who told Politico that this particular appellate court could give Trump an advantage. It's a loophole, if you will, that exists very uniquely in this appellate division of New York, given there's an inherent kind of bias with white-collar defendants who are treated less severely. To that extent, it could cut in his favor.
Okay, in a little bit, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna explain to you guys, does Donald Trump have a good case on appeal? So it's a really interesting case, and we're gonna do a poll on it. In fact, we're putting it up in the chat right now if you're watching live. Very curious what you think, but hear me out on what the issues on appeal are first. That's coming up in a little bit.
So let's get to the specific arguments that the Trump legal team could make upon appeal. So there's the legal theory that allowed for prosecutors to transform 34 typically misdemeanor counts of falsifying business documents into a felony. So that is an argument that has been made. I actually think that's a pretty decent argument, right? The argument is that they trumpeted up, no pun intended, misdemeanor charges into felonies in order to, convict Donald Trump of felonies. And then there's also an issue with the instructions given to jurors. Basically, to prove the underlying crime, jurors had to agree that Trump used unlawful means, but did not have to agree on a single unlawful act. So let me break it down even further because this sounds a little confusing. But basically, Trump was charged with falsifying business documents in order to cover up a crime. Now, the jurors did not have to unanimously agree on what that crime was, right? So the crime can be breaking campaign finance laws, right? But not every juror had to agree that that was the crime that Donald Trump was trying to cover up by falsifying business documents.
I'm gonna explain why.
Yeah, actually, why don't we pause there? Because I am super curious to hear your feedback on this because I actually think those are decent arguments, but maybe I'm wrong.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you. So first of all, the poll, in case you haven't seen it in the live chat, does Trump have a legitimate case for appealing his conviction? No, but I broke it, the yeses down to two things. Yes, but he should lose the appeal, and yes, and he should win the appeal, okay? So now let me explain how it's gonna break down. So step one, in order to convict Donald Trump, you have to go through 3 steps in this case. Convict him of a felony. Step one is, did he falsify business records? This is the easiest one. It's gotta be unanimous. If you heard that it doesn't have to be unanimous, that's not true, that's only true for step 3. It must be unanimous and it is a misdemeanor by itself. Almost no one disputes this. Even people debating on Trump's side go, well, it's just a misdemeanor, but he definitely falsified business records and that's what the conviction was about. Now, step 2 is, was there a conspiracy or an attempt to affect an election by unlawful means? That must also be unanimous, okay? If yes to step 1 and step 2, then felony. But there's a lack of clarity here because what does unlawful means mean? So there's a lot of things that could be unlawful. Did they try to affect the election in an unlawful way? Well, that's why you have to go to the underlying crime to see if he did violate that law. That's why there's a step 3. So when you get to step 3, what were the unlawful means? There were 3 options that the prosecution and the judge gave them. Violations of federal election law. That is a slight problem because that has already hit the statute of limitations, but it's not clear that it matters if it hit the statute of limitations as long as you're using it as an underlying crime. Violation of tax law. That also almost certainly happened, but was it connected enough to this particular falsifying of business records and the falsification of other business records as it relates to these records?
So I need you to pause for a second. You're right about the statute of limitations running out. That is a problem, and it is unclear whether or not that's going to be an argument that could help Trump reverse the convictions. But in regard to the crimes that were committed, remember, Michael Cohen is front and center in this case because Michael Cohen was the one who paid the hush money payments or payment $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. He has served time in prison for it, and I went back to see what he was found guilty of. And so I'm gonna read from the DOJ. This was the press release dating back to 2018 on what Michael Cohen pled guilty to. Cohen, 51 of New York, pleaded guilty to 5 counts of willful tax evasion, 1 count of making false statements to a bank, 1 count of causing an unlawful campaign contribution, that was the hush money payment, and 1 count of making an excessive campaign contribution.
That's also the hush money payment.
Right, so remember, Donald Trump falsified business documents in order to reimburse Michael Cohen, who took out an equity line of credit on his home in order to pay the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, now there's an extra layer of complexity here, but it's okay, I'm gonna break it down simply. Michael Cohen's charged by the Southern District of New York, which is a federal case, because they broke a federal law on campaign finance violations. And that's super clear, he admitted it, he went to prison for it, and Donald Trump did it with him, he was his co-conspirator. But Donald Trump is not charged in a federal case because that statute of limitations has run out. And in fact, the reason it ran out is because Merrick Garland is a weakling and he would not pursue this case.
Bingo, yes.
He should have pursued it in 2021. I went and read law blogs about it and they agree. He was timid and the prosecutors in the Southern District, which are federal prosecutors, read the tea leaves and thought, it doesn't look like the Attorney General wants us to pursue this case against Trump. So it's actually Biden's Attorney General that ironically protected Trump against this case at the federal level.
Yeah, guys, look.
Okay, I'm gonna come back to the New York case in a second.
This was a federal case.
It was.
This was a federal case.
And they should have pursued it federally as they did with Michael Cohen. So a lot of complexity there, but overall, so since they didn't pursue it, then New York pursues it. And Alvin Bragg is the Manhattan District Attorney, so that is related to state, not federal. He pursues the case, but he could still have a federal crime as the underlying crime in order to have unlawful means that support the falsifying of business records, okay? Again, everyone agrees he falsified the business records, but is there an underlying crime that turns the misdemeanor into a felony? So now, the really interesting part is Judge Merchant says, you could take any of the 3 potential crimes as the underlying crime, and you don't have to be unanimous on that. And that's when people flip out and go, oh, well, what do you mean? In a jury case, you always have to be unanimous. No, the theory is this, and it'll be tested in the appeals. No, you've got, let me give you an easier case so you could wrap your head around it, because that's what I needed, right? So let's say the underlying crime was a bank robbery. And in that bank robbery, Donald Trump assaulted someone, killed someone, and also lied on his taxes about where he got the money from the bank robbery. So that's 3 different potential crimes. What the judge is saying, and apparently what New York law is saying is, we don't really care if you thought he did the assault, but he didn't do the murder, or he did the tax evasion but didn't do the assault or the murder, because all you need is 1 underlying crime. So as long as you think there was 1 underlying crime, you don't have to be unanimous about which underlying crime he did in that particular case. So that's why that then turns the misdemeanor into a felony. Now, they're gonna say, and that leads to the 2 major issues in my opinion. A lot of other issues in the appeal, But to me, these are the two I'm unsure about. So number one is, does the jury have to be unanimous in the underlying crime? It's possible that the progressives, the liberals on the court, will side with Donald Trump. Because if you say they don't have to be unanimous on the underlying crime, more people will be convicted.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Right? And usually the liberal justices are for laxer law enforcement. It's a very gross generalization, but generally speaking. But then ironically, Alito and Thomas, who are brutal against criminal defendants, are gonna have to turn around and go, this is the one criminal defendant that we think has special rights. So it's a super interesting case if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And lastly, is it relevant that the statute of limitations has run out on federal election law violations if that is the underlying crime that some of the jurors thought he was violating? So those are good issues. So I don't know which way the courts are gonna decide, because I'm not as well versed in the New York case law as you need to be to adjudicate those very difficult, complicated legal questions. Those are not questions of fact, those are questions of law. Can you apply the law or not? I'll color this jury, I'll bias this jury by saying I think I'm at yes, but he should lose the appeal. But I have a lot of questions, and I'd love to be part of that system that adjudicates it. I'd be fair about it, and I'm not ruling definitively at all. I'm gonna have to see what the judges say on appeal.
Yeah, look, you know how they say watching a debate is never gonna change your mind on what you already believe? That got tested for me yesterday, because for the first time, I heard someone make an argument on Piers Morgan's show, of all places, that changed my mind a little bit. And it was Mark Garagos, who is not a Trump supporter, lifelong Democrat, and he broke down the issues with this trial, and I was like, he's got a point. So I do think that there's some novel legal theory here that if Trump fails in reversing the convictions, if he fails or loses on appeal, I am worried about what the ramifications will be for other defendants moving forward. It sounds like some of these legal standards for conviction have been loosened specifically for Donald Trump. That's what I'm concerned about. And if we set a precedent with Donald Trump, who's to say that it won't be implemented for other people who are far less powerful? Yeah,
so last couple of things here. I'm gonna give you the poll result in a sec, but so I watched that Piers Morgan thing. Garagos was interesting, and maybe we should invite him on and have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
But understand that he also has a bias. His bias is not against Donald Trump at all, but he's a criminal defense attorney. So he does not want the people that he defends being prosecuted with an underlying charge that is, could be one of 3 crimes, right?
Okay, that is a good point. There is a bit of a conflict of interest there, but for all of the restorative justice folks out there, consider how this loosens standards for criminal convictions. Okay, that is a problem in my opinion.
Yeah, so you've got to be principled no matter what.
Right.
So look, if you're, and by the way, that debate was enormously unfair. It was 4 against 1. It was 4
Francesca was the only person.
Yeah, Francesca's the only one who was against Trump, and 4 other people kept saying, oh yeah, for sure, oh yeah, and Piers Morgan drives me nuts on this issue. He makes it sound like, oh my God, Donald Trump is so innocent on everything. They're just trying to frame him.
No, Piers Morgan doesn't know the difference between a legal settlement that isn't hidden from the public in a nefarious way and a hush money payment. Look, you can find what Bill Clinton did in sleeping with an intern and then whatever the settlements he paid and other court cases to be immoral, and I certainly do. But that is different from a secret nefarious hush money payment right before the election.
Yeah, he's got to stop making the Clinton thing.
It's bad, it's a bad point.
Yeah, it just makes no sense. It's not about covering up the sexual affair. You know us, we don't care about the sex. We don't care about covering, we just care if you broke a law or not. Anyways, so look guys, the poll will be up on YouTube community for the Young Turks channel as well. But in the live chat, it's decisive. 83% say no, he does not have a legitimate case in appealing his conviction. 17% say yes, but he should lose. So far, 0% say yes and he should win the appeal.
Hold on, so the people who say yes and he should lose, or yes and he should win the appeal, how many, 0%?
0%.
And then there are people who say, yes, he has a good argument for appeal, but he should lose anyway?
Legitimate, and that's why I phrased it that way. Is it a legitimate case for appeal? I think it is a legitimate case for appeal.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Because, and the reason to frame it.
I'm sorry, I'm curious to see if it does make it to the Supreme Court, what they decide. I'm not a legal expert. I just think like this does open a door to unfairness in other criminal prosecutions, which I am concerned about.
Yeah, and guys, the reason I make that distinction is because the Trump team often has total trash arguments, conspiracy theories, 2,000 mules, just junk. This is a rare case that I think they have interesting matters of law, not fact, to decide an appeal. That's why I'm in the 17% that say, yeah, it's a legitimate case for appeal, but knowing what I read about the law, I think that he will lose, but I'm curious to see what the judges do. So if you're watching the show live Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, we're gonna do more of these interactive polls because we wanna get your opinions on them. That's why we put it in the chat, but we also wanna hear what you say in the YouTube community poll. So happy to have you participate in that as well. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.